When was the best time you thought I clearly underestimated this person? I went to my local racquetball court looking for a pickup game when I was in my early 20s. This was in San Diego back in 91-92. I was reasonably athletic and I was just starting to consider myself competent at racquetball. Anyway, the only other player there was a 70-year-old retired naval officer. He offers up a match so, lacking more athletic opposition, I accepted. Never before and never since have I ever been beaten so badly at anything. He completely and effortlessly destroyed me. We played 3 matches and I scored only 1 point. I was left exhausted and utterly broken. He barely broke a sweat. I don't think I've picked up a racket since then. So utter was my defeat. TLDR. Senior citizen crushes cocky 21-yo 63-1 playing racquetball. Mullet man. I met this guy, a construction worker. He was gruff, older, and rocked a long mullet. The party in the back was thick and went all the way down his back. I thought he was just a crusty, kinda white trash dude, and started calling him Mullet Man. In my head and to my co-workers, we worked for a competing firm, and saw him at industry events. Fast forward a few months, and I overhear him telling someone how his niece has cancer, and he's growing his hair out for her to have a new wig made. He heard that and treated hair works best, so he figured his would be ideal. I've never felt like such a dong. You go, Mullet Man, you beautiful human. That would be a funny stipulation if in order to donate to Locks for Love it had to have been grown out as a mullet. I worked at an electronics retailer 2 years ago. One day, a middle-aged farmer, and I mean farmer, complete with overalls, boots and straight billed cap, came into the store looking for a cell phone. I immediately sold him the simplest, easiest phone we carried, going into great detail on every feature, including the camera, sending text messages and every imaginable part of the phone's hardware and software. The next day, the same guy comes in and I immediately think that he's having phone trouble and resign myself to an hour of explanation. He asks for an external hard drive because he wants to move his custom kernel of Linux to his new computer. I can't remember the exact details. I was totally floored by his request. He then spots my textbook on international political economy. My boss was very forgiving of me studying in slow times, and asks me 15 minutes of in-depth questions on one of the main contemporary theorists in the field, Kulpolanai. Beyond even what myself and my classmates had asked, the class was graduate level. Needless to say, I was berating myself for ever stereotyping this seemingly backwards farmer from the 60s. You got a lot of time to sit and think about stuff when you're watching corn grow. Met a guy while going through college. He was in my major and most of my classes. He was a massive stoner with no freaking brains about him. He failed almost every class due to not trying or slacking off and was always in an insane panic the last 2 weeks of classes to not fail. He ended up repeating classes a lot. At some point, I decided to switch colleges. I graduate this December. I got a LinkedIn request from him yesterday. He has finished his masters in engineer technology now and has loads of recommendations on his profile from employers that he did internships under, all giving him glowing reviews about his work ethic. I left this guy in the dust 3 years ago. Sometime between then and now he cleaned up his act and worked so hard that not only did he close the year gap in courses between me and him due to all his failings, but he also accelerated ahead to additional years and finished a master's. How the frick did you do that, Fred? I watched you come to class high for a year and then you cram 4 years of work into 2? Adderall. I have a friend who has dyslexia and is incredibly shy, even around his close friends. We did an electronics project in high school where we had to design an electronic game or a metronome or some other crap. He chose to make a game and made this incredible device that played a happy little tune when you won and a sad tune when you lost. It sat in a well molded and polished box and had a segment display on the front. I was in awe sitting there with my crappy little metronome that didn't even work. As a dyslexic, although not very severe, I find I can do most tasks like that as good or better than normal students. Although writing on the other hand and foreign language was freaking heck. It handicaps me on writing and language, not much else. A group of family friends and I went paintballing for the first time, which ended up having a bunch of the kids against the parents. Being young and cocky, we thought it would be a stump, and marched confidently into the woods. What we forgot was that all of our parents were immigrants from Taiwan. Taiwan has mandatory military service. I was reminded of that fact rather harshly when I tried to ambush my dad. The paintball in my face pinned this fact to my memory forever. And the older generation of Taiwanese take their military service very seriously indeed. Worked with this kid who was kind of pudgy. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Everyone laughed. He did it. He became a Navy SEAL. I'm working as production assistant on a reality television show. We had to shoot at a record store in a very impoverished crime-laden area of the Bronx and we had a celebrity or two with us. So we hire some security people to keep the local riffraff at bay. In the past the security guys have been overzealous, rude, giant bouncer butthole like dudes. So we're filming and the celebrity walks in. A crowd's already gathered and they're getting loud and being obnoxious. This one super thuggish 20-something starts pushing his way through the crowd and gets to the door but gets stopped by one of the bouncers. Now this security bouncer is a 250 or so pound black dude who is a freaking monster. Not to mention he has a gun on him. I'm freaking out because thug life is getting pushy and yelling at the security guy, yelling at me, and being an butt. Bouncer says, baby, you know I want to let you in here. I love you man, but I can't. It's my job. You know how it is. I got kids and with that style of yours I'm sure you got yourself a hot mama back home too. Thuggish kid goes 8-man slap hugs the security guy then walks out. Situation entirely diffused. Security guy looks at me with this huge grin and says gotta kill him with kindness, baby. That is just the coolest and kindest line I've ever heard. Dang. I found out one of my dumber friends had the unique ability of knowing how long anything would take. Anything. She was not the brightest button, failed out of college, made terrible financial decisions, but dang if she didn't know how long it would take to go to Walmart, get gas, and come home. 34 minutes. If you gave her a highway marker, she would tell you down to the minute how far away you were from your house. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like it, and she was never wrong. And I can't even approximate short distance. 4+m. The little woman who was my first partner in Taekwondo. I was a much taller white belt and she was a green belt. That was the day I watched the gymnasium ceiling pass overhead in a slow, dreamy way, followed by the sound of my landing. I got taken down by a short 120 pounds Korean kid. We were both second degree black belts at the time and I was 6 feet 2 inches and 140-ish. Turns out, the bigger they are the harder they fall is very true. I was roughly about 8 or 9. So me, my mom, 2 brothers and a friend all went to the cinema. We ended up getting out of the cinema at like 10. As we were walking back to the car I kind of dropped back a little bit as I was in my own world. All I heard from behind me was a teen's voice getting my attention. Unaware of any real dangers in life at such a tender age and my mom a few meters up from me I turned around. As soon as I turned around one of the kids knees me in the stomach and the other one punched me in the face. The worst bit was I couldn't even shout as I was winded. A few seconds passed and I shouted. My mom turned seen me on the floor and started sprinting for these kids. She ran straight past me. I can imagine she was probably thinking, frick him, they are going to be eating through a straw. So right in front of me my mom grabbed one of them and started punching this 16-year-old in the face and throwing him around like a rag doll. The other one was shouting for her to stop and he ran up to my mom and she literally did the same to him. But I could see blood all over this one's jacket. She had ripped part of his ear. Security came over not so long after and then the police. The kids were arrested and nothing came of my mom kicking 7 shades of crap out of these 2 kids. Turns out they had been going around the metro center, where the cinema was, shoplifting, pickpocketing and being all round urethras. Safe to say everybody in school knew the next day. I imagine it was a good bully deterrent too. When I was going through college I was put into a group for a group project with a guy that I'd been paired with before. He'd done nothing. It was awful. We ended up picking up all of his slack last time, and I wasn't looking forward to doing it again. Well, long story short, apparently he had a little come to Jesus with his advisor and realized he needed to put effort into graduating. That dude freaking carried us. 11/10 stars. It was amazing. Group leader asked him to do something. He knocked it out of the freaking park. We literally got a 100% on the project. Top grade in our class. My grandpa has Parkinson's, and in the last few years, he has been getting really frail to the point where you can't feel anything between the skin and the bone. Anyway, taking care of him was becoming a lot for my step-grandmother, so she tried finding a good nursing home for him. At the home where he went, people treated him so badly that he had a flashback to being a POW in the Korean War. My grandma gets a call that they found him 3 miles away perfectly fine. But we all thought the dude couldn't even get out of bed on his own. My grandfather's getting close to dying now, and he certainly did a lot during his life. It was good to hear that he still had some of that in him, when he seemed like just a shell. My father-in-law. My mother-in-law raised my husband and his brother, and my father-in-law was always kind of this quiet presence. She always said he was disinterested, and didn't care about the boys. She said a lot of really awful things about him. Their divorce was messy, but I took what she said at face value. Fast forward to now. When I got laid off, my father-in-law, in his quiet way, invited us to stay at his house until I finished school, with our 2 crazy toddlers and our old cat who doesn't always make it to the litter box. I was hesitant at first, but we didn't really have options. Turns out he's this salt of the earth guy. He works and reads and builds stuff for our babies to play with, like a 6 feet tall working windmill, and is the best grandpa any kid could ever want. Turns out he has always loved the boys deeply, but struggled with depression since my mother-in-law took them and left. He has bought every birthday present, school clothes, etc. since they were little, even though they had no idea. I also found out he has been paying all of mother-in-law's bills even after the boys grew up and moved out. When I asked him why, he said she's the mother of my children. I don't want to see her struggle. One of the best people I know. I hope one day we can repay him for all of his kindness. Whoa, people like that amaze me the most. I was in high school and behind my friend's house there was some farmland. One day, for whatever reason, 4 of us decided to go out there and build a fort. It ended up turning out awesome, and we decided to spend the night in it. We filled up an empty water bottle with his parents' vodka and built a fire out there. The owner of the property must have saw the fire and didn't appreciate us trespassing, so he called the cops. Around midnight, about 5 or 6 cops surrounded us. We were all underage, and we tried to convince the cops we weren't drinking. It worked, because we hadn't really started drinking much of the vodka yet, and the cops didn't think to open our water bottle. So the cops tell us as long as we put out the fire and take down the fort, we wouldn't get into any trouble. My idiot friend says, "Okay officer, we'll just go ahead and put out this fire and be on our way," and dumps the bottle into the fire. FOOOSH. Instantly in handcuffs. Underestimated my friend that day. He was that stupid. Maybe I overestimated him. Oh well. Still a funny story. That's a better example of overestimation. I did outreach with street sex workers for quite a few years. One went missing under suspicious circumstances and there was evidence that she had been murdered, but no body. The police had the guy but needed to build a strong case. He was known to some of the women, so police wanted to talk with as many as possible. Most did, but there was one who was rumored to have strong evidence of the man's intent. She was so strung out all the time, and literally months went by of her blowing off appointments with the police to tell what she knew. She would hide from them as she was scared. They finally pick her up on the street and she talks to them. They knew making appointments was a dead end. Turns out she did have some great info and they wanted her to appear in court. We helped her as much as possible, got her a decent outfit and toiletries, and kept reminding her of the date and location of the trial. She didn't show up when she was due, much to everyone's disappointment. Next day of the trial, in she walked, clean, in her nice outfit and sober. Testified very well. In fact, impressive. She said later she had a binge the day before due to being nervous and knew she would not come across well. He is now serving a life sentence. Really didn't think she had it in her, but she happily proved us all wrong. I underestimated my cousin. She has always seemed to be the queen bee of middle school and I resented her for it. But one day I heard that she completely ditched the in crowd because they were making fun of some kid. I realized I had been completely wrong about her character and that I am extremely proud of her for this. That is truly something that takes a lot of maturity to do. Underestimated, but in a good way. There was a Super Smash Bros. Brawl tournament in 2009 at the dorms, open to all residents. It was a team tournament, so you got matched up with one person for the whole night. I get a soft-spoken guy, whose first words I heard were, "Huh, I thought this one had Mega Man in it." So I'm cursing several Greco-Roman gods at getting probably the biggest noob in the room. Turns out, he was the best in the room, and was just trolling me. Took on everyone and won with a little help from me, here and there. We later played against each other in a 1 vs 1 tournament, and he beat me by a smidge, but he helped me get a $25 Best Buy gift card. I was arguing with a customer at work. I, like a smart butt, tried to reinforce a point I was making by quoting the only line I knew from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. She, in a fit of anger, proceeded to give me the next 20 lines of that character's soliloquy, all from memory. I was owned. Big time. According to the laws of screenwriting, now you have to marry her. I once thought it was safe to change the baby's diaper because he couldn't possibly crap anymore. Nope, he crapped more while I was changing him. I invited my girlfriend along to paintball for my 21st birthday. Her grandparents owned a farm, so I knew she wasn't a princess, but she certainly isn't low maintenance these days. The game was capture the flag. The field was set up in a valley with a team on either side and a single meter wide footbridge connecting the two sides. The flag was sitting in the middle of the bridge. The only cover was 2 waist-high walls on either side. We push up to the flag and are pinned by a vicious volley of vivid viscera. Naturally, I am scared shitless and hunker down. Clearly all that time playing FPSs hasn't trained me to be a super soldier at all. Just as I had mustered enough courage to peep my head above the cover, I see my girlfriend blaze past with reckless abandon, shooting wildly. She nabs the flag, runs back past me and back towards base. She never got hit. I have never been more stunned impressed than that moment. TLDR. My girlfriend wears the pants. I poop them. I have never been more stunned impressed turned on than that moment. You missed one. In one of my first taekwondo sparring classes, this obese black dude is taking class and I'm thinking, good for him for trying, but what in the world can he even do? We get to sparring. He kicks me effortlessly in the side of the head. I didn't even see the kick coming. At the end of class, during cool down stretching, the dude had a full side split. Never underestimated someone based on their size after that again. My grandparents had a beautiful marriage. They met at a sailor's dance when my grandfather was in the Navy. My grandmother married him and moved to the US. They were loving and inseparable. Best friends. Soulmates, I'd say. I've never seen two people treat each other with that amount of respect. In 2001, my grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. It was heartbreaking to watch. Near the end, he would carry around their wedding photo asking where his wife was, refusing it was her. She endured the heartache and took care of him until it became difficult. Due to the disease, he became violent and frustrated. He would get lost and lash out. Even when he went into hospice care, not speaking, she sat by him and was strong for us. For him. For herself. In 2004, he passed away. During the funeral, we were all a wreck. I remember trying to fight through tears to see my grandmother as she walked up to the casket. She leaned down to kiss him, promising to see him soon. When they gave her the flag, smiled and looked as proud as could be. A few years later, I recalled this to her and asked how she was so strong. She said that nothing would separate them, not even death. She said she feels him every second of every day. Clearly underestimated. It sounds terrible, but I sincerely hope that when the time comes my wife goes before I do. I love her dearly and I don't want her to go through my death at an advanced age. That is a burden I would rather take on myself. Even if I only live another hour longer, just so long as she doesn't have to deal with the knowledge that I am gone. Nothing much, but when I saw my friend play chess, I've always considered myself a decent player, but when I heard him think aloud, just how far ahead he thinks to make the right moves to fork my pieces, win trades and eventually win the game, it really opened my eyes that he's not just another derpy kid at school. Especially with chess. Some people just think on another level. They just formulate these progression of moves that you can't play against. Insane game though. At karaoke I didn't let my brother sing cause I knew he was really bad, so I thought I was doing everyone a favor. He stole the mic from my friend and blew everyone away. Now he won't serenade me when I ask him to. I underestimated my mom's whole family. Up until recently I never really bothered to ask her about her childhood. She grew up in Bolivia with 3 other sisters and a brother in a small apartment complex. Her father died when she was about 10 years old and it was just her mother and her siblings left. Almost all their money that was supposed to be left to them went to who they believed to be her father's jeweler, possible mistress. They were poor and had no income. Everyone in her house had to start working so that they could survive. The older siblings had to drop out to send their younger ones to school. My mother met my father and left to America with the rest of the sisters and started a great life here. Her brother went to college and eventually became El Defensor del Pueblo, a government-appointed human rights lawyer. He is now running for the head of a university and possibly working his way up to run for the presidency of Bolivia, rumor. When I got beat in wrestling to a mentally handicapped person, twice. In my defense, the first time I ended up getting second in the tournament. Long story short, started a new graduate program at a small school. Everyone in the class is becoming very close with one another. Quietest person in the class. Don't speak to him for the first month or so. Turns out to be one of the wittiest and most hilarious people I have ever met. In a small group of 3 or 4 people, everything out of his mouth sends the rest of us into hysterics. Speak less, say more. When the quiet kid who got picked on by the basketball jock in my chemistry got up and broke a glass beaker and used a shard of it to press into his cheek when it started bleeding while yelling in his face, "I locked if you ever frick with me again, I'm going to frick your world completely up, do you fricking understand me?" He was 8 years younger than me and I'd known him for 5 years. He never showed any interest in me. One day he walked up and asked, "Will you be my girlfriend?" I laughed in his face. "We've been married 10 years. He's stubborn. I'm glad." Or, "This one made me smile. That's lovely." I've told this story before, but heck, it works here. My grandmother was sort of my idol. At 80, she still had her license, wasn't your typical old lady and was pretty dang tough. Had lived through breast cancer twice, double mastectomy, and choosing divorce and single motherhood in an era when you didn't do that. We were in the grocery store together when I was about 10, so that would have been mid-90s. There were 3 other people in line ahead of us, a very obvious gay couple of guys, and a big, tough, bodybuilder type, and then us. And the bodybuilder guy is just spewing all the hatred he can. Gay guys are totally trying to ignore him, which is just firing him up more. Finally, my grandmother, a very tolerant woman, taps the bodybuilder on the shoulder and says, "They aren't hurting you, leave them be," to which he answers, "What they are doing is disgusting and they shouldn't be around normal people." My grandmother stares him dead in the eye, deadpan expression, and says, "Sir, I know you don't agree with me or them, but a good as fucking might lighten you up." You could have heard a pin drop. The cashier froze. I froze. The bodybuilder froze. The gay guys froze. My grandmother just held eye contact. After about 10 seconds, he dropped his eyes, and everybody there realized they were seeing a sort of crushing of his soul. He quietly stepped out of line. My grandmother never said another word about it, except when we got to the car. She looked over at me and said, "Being a grown-up bully is a sad thing to be." The guy could have squashed her like a fly. I was never able to look at her the same anymore. She was an even more mystical type of figure after that. Told a guy who I had previously turned down for a date that if he wanted to woo me, I was okay with that. We had talked about wanting to get to know one another better as friends. He said he would have a hard time not flirting with me while doing so. At some point in our exchange, I mentioned I have a weakness for love letters. He proceeded to write me a series of the most amazing like letters, which slowly turned into love letters I have ever received. Realized I was falling in love with him about a month later. Still together. Sapient slut, you're adorable. First time meeting one of my now best friends. He was 5'7" at the time, and he bet me that he could touch rim. I took the bet, raising the loot to $5. Well, my friend touched rim alright. He also dunked with no real effort. TL. DR. I no longer have $5. Thought this would end up about you two turning gay. Decided to play a little MK9 with my pops one day after school. I was a better player at the time. I'd managed to clear the ladder on expert yada yada and would play with him on occasion. I usually won without much effort, but little did I know, he had spent the majority of the week wrecking crap in practice mode. We stepped into that ring, me as Smoke, him as Scorpion, and I discovered the meaning of fear. Never again did I underestimate his combat skills. I discovered the meaning of fear. You've led a fairly peaceful life, friend. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.